Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Jenna and I'm the producer for the Roxborough House Roundtables at Jefferson East Falls. Today's roundtable focuses on the immigration crisis and the legal structures that shape our nation's immigration system. Immigration remains one of the most complex and widely debated issues in American public life, raising questions about federal authority, constitutional protections, humanitarian responsibility, and the future of reform. We are honored to be joined by Kristen Dennis, an immigration attorney who will share her professional expertise and practical insights into navigating the immigration system. She will help us better understand the rules, regulations, and constitutional principles that govern immigration law and how they impact individuals and families in real-world settings. This is also a student-led panel discussion featuring representatives from Justice Across Borders, College Democrats, and East African Student Association. Our student panelists will guide the conversation, pose thoughtful questions, and help connect legal frameworks to lived experiences and community concerns. Through legal analysis and open dialogue, we aim to explore not only how the immigration system functions, but how it reflects broader debates about democracy, human rights, and justice. And now, please join me in welcoming Kristen Dennis and our student panelists to begin today's discussion.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ethan Nguyen. I'm a freshman in the Law and Society program, and I'm the president of the College Democrats chapter of East Falls.
Hello, I'm Sudey Kokakis. I'm first year freshman of, I'm a Law and Society major, and I am founder of Justice Across Borders and president of Bridge.
Hi, I'm Samhar Semi-Weldab. I am a junior business management major with a double minor in sports and law and society, and I'm the founder and president of East African Student Society.
All right. Well, before we begin, can you just start off by telling us a bit about yourself and what led you to become an immigration attorney?
Absolutely. So thank you again for having me this evening. I really appreciate the opportunity. I started my legal career with a large Philadelphia firm in commercial litigation. I had some experience with some administrative law in the form of intellectual property, and I had the opportunity to do a federal clerkship, which is far and away still my favorite job I've ever had. But I had the opportunity to work with a new partner who was working on employment-based immigration matters, and it was really as though a light bulb went off. I had the opportunity to move out of a very adversarial practice area, litigation, into one where at the end of the day, if everything went well, everyone walked away happy. Employers, the foreign national joining the country, and really the country itself benefiting from these new sources of talent. So it was a really great transition, and I've loved every minute of my practice in it since.
All right. And from your perspective, what are the main reasons people choose to leave their home countries today?
I think fundamentally the reasons haven't changed much over the decades. I think many people come to reunite with family who are already here, to pursue education or employment, or in response to challenging conditions in their home countries, war, disaster, things like that. All of those factors are still impacting immigration today.
Can you explain the process of immigrating to the United States and eventually becoming a citizen?
It is a long one, and it is not easy, and it hasn't been updated in decades. Primarily, there are three types of avenues that can lead to immigration to the United States. Those include family-based pathways, such as through marriage to a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, employment-based pathways, either sponsored by an employer or petitioning for yourself based on employment, and then humanitarian-based reasons, things like asylum or refugee applications. Most individuals will come here in a temporary status. Those can be things like F1 student status or H-1B specialty occupation workers. And then they'll transition through one of those permanent residence avenues to lawful permanent residence, commonly called the green card. After a certain period of time, typically 5 years, then you become eligible to apply for citizenship, where you can get all the rights and benefits of being a U.S. citizen.
Do you think there's a difference depending on where someone is from?
there is absolutely a difference, and that's baked into our system. So in either the family or the employment-based context, the number of green cards that are available each government fiscal year have a numeric limit. So there's already a cap on both of those processes. And then that cap number is divided up between the applicant's country of birth, which also has an impact on the process because many people have dual citizenships, they're born one place, but they obtain citizenship elsewhere. All our system really cares about is where you were born. And certain countries, people from certain countries, have outsized demand for permanent residence in the United States than there are allotted visas. And that creates decades-long backlogs based purely on the luck of where you happen to be born.
What is an F1 status immigrant, and how does someone go from F1 to an H1 visa?
So the F1 is the academic student visa. It's to enter the U.S. to pursue full-time studies at a Department of Homeland Security certified college, university, seminary, conservatory. There's kind of a broad range of institutions you can study at. But there are very strict requirements. It comes with limited, if any, work authorization because the whole purpose of the temporary classification is for study. But many F1 students are allowed to take advantage of practical training opportunities, chances to take the education that you're receiving in the classroom and apply it in the workforce. Many students will then use that practical training as a bridge to pursue a temporary employment visa. And the most common and yet the most difficult to obtain is the H-1B visa for specialty occupation workers. We're actually, tomorrow, the H-1B lottery season opens up for positions that will start next fall. There is a numeric limit on the number of H visas that are available. It has not adjusted as our labor force has adjusted. So there are 85,000 of those H-1B visas available each year, and demand is usually somewhere in the 200,000 people trying to obtain one of those H-1B visas.
And what is a green card, and who is eligible to apply for it?
So the green card is shorthand for permanent residence, lawful permanent residence. Again, there are kind of a number of ways to get there, but the two most common pathways are through family or through employment. That can include sons and daughters of U.S. citizens, spouses of U.S. citizens, and then as that immediate family connection kind of gets more tenuous, the wait times and the numeric limitations get more onerous. On the employment side of things, we have what we call priority workers. Those are outstanding professors and researchers, individuals with extraordinary ability. We also have a category for those in professional occupations who have advanced degrees, those in professional occupations with bachelor's degrees, and then what we call skilled workers, or we also have a category for religious workers. And then the fifth preference category is for employment creation. You might have heard that called EB-5. That's where if you invest a certain amount of money and create jobs, that can be an avenue toward permanent residence. Theoretically, we may also have a gold card process out there right now, although that hasn't really been explained in detail how that will work or be implemented.
And do you think, depending on like your category, it will typically take longer?
Yes. So again, as those numeric limitations apply, and you can see this really in the family preference categories as well. When we get to brothers and sisters of adult U.S. citizens, I think some talented actuaries have kind of done the math on those, and many people will probably die before they ever become eligible to actually file for their green card, waiting in those lines.
All right, and what is a visa, and are there limits or quotas for visas or green cards in certain categories?
Yes. So I think it's helpful to define terms. As lawyers, we love words and what they mean. So a visa is a very specific document typically placed in your passport that allows you to seek entry to the United States. I like to analogize it to the key to your house. You only need that key when you're trying to get into your house. Once you're in the house, you can hang your key on the hook and not worry about it. Once you're in the house, you need to worry then about your immigration status. And so that can be extended or changed through filing applications or petitions with the government. We have non-immigrant visa classes, which are temporary visas. And again, we have family-based types, we have employment-based types. And then we have immigrant visas, which is part of the process toward becoming a lawful permanent resident.
Thank you so much.
So when it comes to immigrants, whether they be undocumented or documented, if I stops them, what kind of rights do they have?
So you do have constitutional protections regardless of your citizenship status. One is the right to due process. What that process looks like can differ depending on your immigration status and also geographically where you are in the United States. As you get closer to the borders, our immigration authorities have greater latitude to pursue what's called expedited removal, where they don't have to give you the full breadth of due process protections. You have the right to legal representation. Unlike in criminal matters, that representation does not need to be provided to you by the government. Immigration matters, including removal proceedings in immigration court, those are considered civil administrative matters. So you can have access to an attorney, but you have to provide that attorney for yourself. You're still protected against unreasonable searches and seizures. So warrants are still very important in the immigration context. Right now, you're probably hearing a lot of discussion about different types of warrants. There are judicial warrants. That's where law enforcement goes before a neutral magistrate and makes their case to show why they have probable cause for what they're trying to do. That's a judicial warrant. And then there are administrative warrants, which, as the name implies, are documents that are issued by the agency itself without a judicial check. There's more latitude to decline to comply with an administrative warrant, but you also have to be mindful of your circumstances and your safety and what you feel comfortable with in any given situation. And you also have the right to record interactions with law enforcement. This is obviously another very fraught area at present, and so when I'm speaking with clients about, considering their situation, you want to be mindful of your safety, and in particular right now, not doing anything that could be perceived as impeding or obstructing law enforcement, because that can be grounds for separate criminal charges.
So, as you mentioned, the Fourth Amendment rights do apply to immigrants that even though they might be undocumented or undocumented, but could I still enter someone's home without a warrant?
So, legally, a warrant is required to enter a home, and it should be a judicial warrant. So a lot of the guidance out there is do not consent to entry into private spaces. That can be a home, that can be, private areas of a campus or a workspace. I think we've seen reporting in the news that the agencies are analyzing that issue a little differently, especially in terms of judicial warrants versus administrative warrants. Oftentimes rights are determined in the breach. So when something has not gone as it ought to, and then the courts need to get involved.
And what should someone do if ICE does show up at their home or workplace?
So you have the right not to answer questions. That can differ depending on your local jurisdiction. So some states actually have laws that require you to provide your name in response to questioning. But you do have the right, if you're not being arrested, to decline to answer questions, to walk away from a situation. You can ask agents to show you their badges and identify themselves. Even if officers have warrants, judicial warrants or administrative warrants, you have the right to remain silent. It's important to remember that any response you give, even your name, the country in which you were born, your immigration status, any of that information can be used against an individual in immigration proceedings. Very similar to how the Miranda warnings work in the criminal law context. We would always advise don't physically resist, don't reach for belongings without permission. If you're going to try and get documents out, say that's what you're doing. Be slow and methodical about it, because again, the utmost concern is safety. You have the right to say no to searches of your car, your house, your person, but searches can be done as part of arrests, and again, if they have a judicial warrant. The other thing I would add is that, immigration documents can come into play in the moment. So U.S. citizens don't have to carry proof of citizenship in the United States, but having proof can help to resolve encounters with ICE. So that's, again, something to think about. A lot of what we talk about with clients is risk tolerance. What do you feel comfortable with? What would make you feel more comfortable in specific situations if you have companions with you? So that's something to bear in mind. Non-citizens in the United States are required to have copies on them of what are called alien registration documents. That's most commonly your I-94 admission record, which shows what status you've been admitted to the United States and for how long. It differs depending on your status. For green card holders, the green card is evidence of your alien registration, and it is technically a misdemeanor not to have those documents with you. I would suggest if you individually are not sure what documents you should have with you or what to carry with you, talk to an attorney about it, because a lot depends on your individual situation.
So if ICE were to detain someone, could they hold them indefinitely without charges?
So the answer to that is no. Again, how that's enforced, there's been a great deal of discussion about the need for habeas proceedings, and for those proceedings to get underway quickly. So particularly for at-risk populations, having an established relationship with an attorney who's familiar with habeas proceedings, with your immigration status and your case, can be really important, so that in the event that someone's detained, your family or trusted contacts can get in touch with that attorney and get the wheels of that process moving quickly. Because I think we've already seen the way our immigration enforcement system works is that people are moved around the system very quickly. And there are certain jurisdictions that are friendlier to the enforcement side or friendlier to the the individual's rights and responsibilities. So
you mentioned having a lawyer who might be familiar with the system, but what other legal recourses exist in the situation that someone was detained?
So when we're talking about detentions, it really comes down to familiarity with, again, those habeas procedures in federal court. So that is an order for release of the person. And and immigration bond proceedings, because typically these things are going hand in hand. You're being detained as part of removal proceedings. So while a habeas petition might serve to get someone released from immediate detention, typically the next result is we'll release you, but then you have to post a bond, and then you're in immigration bond proceedings. So as with just about every area of law, even within immigration law, there are niches. And so we have colleagues who focus their practice and specialize in representation in removal proceedings, in bond hearings, and we're starting to see more and more, by necessity, become familiar with habeas proceedings in federal court.
I want to circle back to what you said earlier about constitutional rights, about the Fourth. How would other constitutional rights, such as the First, Sixth, or Eighth Amendments, apply to undocumented immigrants on U.S. soil?
So the Sixth Amendment we commonly think about as the right to counsel. Again, you have a right to counsel, but it does not have to be provided to you by the government. The First Amendment does still apply to persons in the United States. Again, I think we're seeing in practice differing enforcement or recognition of that. And in particular, last spring in 2025, we saw efforts from the Department of State in conjunction with the Department of Homeland Security to identify international students who had participated in protests and activities like that and take steps to revoke visas. There's a really fantastic decision out of the district court in Massachusetts in a case of the American Association of University Professors versus Rubio that goes into detail about the constitutional rights that all persons have, including the students and the faculty members who were the plaintiffs in that case. It's 161 pages, but it is worth the read. But that, again, is really where those rights are going to be enforced, is likely in the federal courts.
All right. And what would the 14th Amendment say about citizenship?
So the 14th Amendment and the Due Process Clause, the Supreme Court has recognized that persons in the United States, not only citizens, have due process rights. And again, it looks different depending on what enforcement actions are being taken against you. So your due process rights in immigration court don't necessarily look the same as your due process rights in a criminal proceeding in state or federal court. And we're also seeing further exploration of what due process looks like in terms of removals. Again, I think it might even have been yesterday afternoon, a district court decision regarding removal of individuals, and they may in fact be eligible for removal from the country because of their lack of status, but they're being removed to countries to which they have no connection. It's not their country of citizenship or birth, they're third countries. And so the courts have been exploring, what does due process look like there? How much notice do you have to give to these individuals of where you intend to remove them to? And do they have the opportunity to raise fears about what happens if they're removed to these types of third countries?
Thank you so much.
How would you describe the biggest legal or policy challenge immigrants face today?
I think right now one of the biggest challenges is the shifting nature of what is the policy, how is it being enforced. Immigration laws themselves, the statutes and even the regulations that underpin them are incredibly slow to change. It's an area that I think our government has a lot to say about, but not a lot of follow through in terms of updating the laws or the regulations. And so how the policy actually takes shape is really informed by the agencies themselves. So we see these fluctuations back and forth as administrations change, as their priorities and public perception changes. And I think that is one of the most challenging areas, is to stay on top of what are the rules right now. And I also think that because the immigration laws are so slow to adapt and update themselves as our society itself changes, our labor market, what our population looks like, that also causes challenges and harm, even for people doing it, quote unquote, the right way. It's a shifting landscape.
In your experience, where do you see inequality in how immigration law is applied or enforced?
So I think right now, one of the areas that we're really seeing challenges have to do with individuals navigating these temporary statuses. Some of them are creations of executive order, like the DACA program or the briefly lived DAPA program. Some of them are programs that exist in the statutes but depend on the executive's determination. So those are things like temporary protected status, where we've had temporary protected status in place for several countries for significant periods of time. That creates reliance interests in the people who hold those statuses. And then again, we're seeing them sort of cut off and eliminated in short order, and not necessarily with kind of the detailed level of explanation or policy basis that you would expect. And many of those decisions seem to be informed by potentially national origin or racial, even animus.
What are some barriers that prevent immigrants from accessing legal help?
I think a major factor in that area has to do with capacity. So finding attorneys who have that specialized experience, again, the difference between employment-based immigration versus removal defense, and particularly right now for our colleagues that practice in removal defense within the immigration courts, we have limited numbers of practitioners in those areas, and they are already overwhelmed. Many of our pro bono organizations suffered funding cuts to their programs over the last several years, so they too aren't able to step into that gap and provide the services. So I really think it's the cost of services and then the capacity for the lower or pro bono services to assist all the people who need help.
Can you share a case or experience that really stuck out with you in your career?
I was trying to think of a specific case that I came back to, but I think what I enjoy most about this process is the individuals that I get to work with and really see through, often from that very first employment visa after they've just completed a degree. And, again, for many of our clients, that process to get to the green card takes years, decades sometimes. And to go with someone through that process from the first visa to the green card, we're often moving on to citizenship, or they're coming back to us because they've gotten married, and now we're working on that type of case. It's so rewarding because you really get the opportunity to see how individual people make a difference in this country, in their communities, and so it's that opportunity to work with individuals and really see them for everything they can bring to the United States.
What is the most challenging aspect of your work in immigration law, and how do you stay hopeful and motivated in such emotional and political charged field?
So certainly right now, it's funny when I think back about how I ended up in immigration law. litigation was so adversarial. And then I had the opportunity to get into employment-based immigration. And again, it was sort of an everyone wins at the end of the day when it works out. And now it's much more adversarial. So I think the challenging aspect, certainly over the last 10 years or so, has again been the fluctuation in what is the policy today. What are the rules today? And so often we're dealing with memos. At one point it was tweets. So legally that's a challenging aspect. I think, again, how we stay hopeful and motivated. I so appreciate my colleagues and our ability to lean on one another for challenging cases when the government is being frustrating, to really come together and come up with creative solutions. How can we get people to their solution in their case? And when you get to help someone to, especially, getting to citizenship, it's that makes it. The person who reaches out and says, I got my green card today, that's enough to keep you going. And then especially the clients that follow up and kind of share with you their milestones after you've long since finished working with them, makes it worth it.
All right, wrapping up our questions, we were wondering what advice you would give to someone who wants to pursue immigration law.
So I would recommend, if you already have an interest in it, it can be very helpful to get a window into what the practice is like. And if you think, again, we have so many niches within the field, if you think you have an idea of what type, try to find opportunities to shadow an immigration lawyer, to volunteer for some of those public service organizations, just to see what the experience is like, because there are so many different types of it. Some of my colleagues, I think, really thrive in immigration court and that sort of reacting on your toes in front of a judge, and to a client who might throw you a curveball right before you walk in there. That does not appeal to me. I enjoy having the liberty to kind of craft and put together a petition before I send it off to the government and have all of my arguments in a row. So getting to see what those different opportunities look like. If you're headed into law school, administrative law is a really helpful course, because especially now we're spending a lot more time maybe considering challenges to regulations and rules based on whether or not they complied with requirements of administrative law, and really honing your writing and presentation skills, because so much of what we do or what we're preparing clients to do is to advocate for themselves, to tell their story in a way that someone sitting at a desk in Chicago or I'm trying to think of where all their field offices are, but some person that you will never meet is sitting behind a desk and you have to convince them why your client is eligible for and really merits this immigration benefit they're seeking. So writing and advocacy skills.
All right, and what can we do for immigrants in our community?
So much of it is showing up to support them in kind of all the ways that people are members of a community. And I think a lot of times it's even just listening, hearing their stories, hearing their backgrounds, what has brought them here, and being an ally where you can. Again, in terms of advocacy, for those of us who have the privileges that come with U.S. citizenship, exercising those where our colleagues maybe don't feel safe doing so is a great way to support our communities.
This is based on my experience with a colleague. He came here on a visa and was looking to get the green card, but there was delays, and this is before the car situation, delays, and was very fearful that he may have to leave the country. So what happens to people who are doing what they're supposed to do? Mm-hmm. They apply, but yet you have all the bureaucratic delays. do they go in, are they here illegally then? If their visas run out, and are they subject to arrest then by ICE at this point?
So in many ways, the immigration system has cobbled together Band-Aids to deal with these long delays. So in the employment context, you come here and you have that first H-1B visa. Usually that's only valid for a total of 6 years. No one is making it through the green card process in 6 years at the current rates of just even how long the government takes to do its part of the job. So we've cobbled together these regulatory Band-Aids that say, okay, if you've hit this certain milestone in permanent residence, but you're stuck in these decades-long backlogs, or the government's just been sitting on your case for a year, you get these extra extensions. So there can be ways to keep that temporary status until you have a green card in your hand, and that is a lot of what my job is about. But there can be folks where that's simply not possible, and if your temporary status lapses and you don't have a green card, you are at risk of removal, and that can be very challenging. Again, a lot of what my role is trying to make sure that that doesn't happen and see what other options are out there. It's a lot of deadlines and managing timelines and poking people or their employers or family members to start the process early enough that they have this kind of leeway to take advantage of these Band-Aids.
Just one more question for me. In Minneapolis, when we're seeing a lot of people being rounded up in different cities, it was told to us that these are dangerous criminals, but statistics have shown that a very, very small percentage of them. So who is, are dangerous criminals, so who is being rounded up? What is the goal as far as you see it, at least in the courts?
So what our colleagues on the ground in, first it was Chicago, then Minneapolis, what our colleagues are telling us is that enforcement-wise, they're really going for what would be considered low-hanging fruit. So people whose temporary status has lapsed, who don't have a status or something to protect them. So they're really not targeting, here's a list of individuals that have criminal charges against them. It's who might I be able to make the easiest possible removal case against. And what we're also seeing too are what we would call like collateral arrests, where maybe there's an individual that they know they are looking to put into removal proceedings because they have overstayed or their status has lapsed. But if they can make a finding of reasonable suspicion that this other person in the room is without lawful status, then they'll arrest them as well. But I mean, we're seeing instances of U.S. citizens being detained. I think because of lack of training in the enforcement officers themselves, lack of guidance, that was a prominent issue, and I think it was this week's testimony involving Secretary Noem. So it looks like they're going for the easiest case to make rather than specifically identifying like high priority individuals.
And just to summarize what you said earlier, if ICE comes to this campus, I think it's important to reiterate, what would you recommend students, faculty, administration do?
So I know the university has kind of an established protocol, and it's important to follow that in terms of, immigration enforcement, law enforcement can be in public spaces. So really making sure that private spaces are clearly delineated. If you have a concern for yourself or others, making sure you are in a private space can be important. And making sure that policies regarding who's allowed in certain spaces are followed. So if you need a swipe card to get in the building, you swipe. You're not letting the people behind you in. Notifying public safety if you see officers, any kind of law enforcement officers, on campus so that it can be escalated through appropriate channels. We generally recommend don't run away, but really those lines between what is public and what is private are important. And the ACLU has a bunch of really great sort of pocket guides to what to do if ICE is at your home, at your workplace, etc.
If we have a short period of time, anyone on the panel has any additional follow-up? If somebody in the audience has any questions?
Are there any, you mentioned that one of the biggest challenges is helping people figure out what the rules are right now. Are there any resources, books, maybe websites, or other professional places that you would recommend students look to educate themselves?
So it would tend to be websites over books, just again because it's changing so rapidly. But one of the other things that I caution is, being savvy about resources on the internet. So our professional organization, the American Immigration Attorneys Association, AILA, has posts about as things update. The National Immigration Law Center, NILC, is a great resource. And the ACLU, frankly, is doing a really great job on this. But an immigration lawyer that can talk to you about your specific circumstances, there's no replacement for that because so much depends on the individual facts in a case.
Sorry, I followed that.
Yeah.
Are there organizations you're aware of in Philly that could provide that for people who may or may not have the financial resources?
So that's one of the most challenging aspects. In the past, I would have suggested HIAS, Pennsylvania, the Nationality Service Center, and is it the Welcoming Center? And all those organizations still exist, but I think their resources right now are stretched very thin. The AILA has an attorney finder that it's helpful because you can sort or filter your responses based on practice areas. So if you have a particular concern, I'm interested in pursuing citizenship, or I need a removal defense attorney, it can help point you to those individuals. And frankly, as an attorney, a lot of what we do is make those connections to our colleagues. And so it doesn't hurt to get in touch with an attorney in private practice to at least ask those questions and maybe find resources that, if are not pro bono, might be low bono, for lack of a better word.
Thank you all for being part of today's meaningful conversation on immigration law and the broader challenges surrounding the immigration crisis. A special thank you to Kristen Dennis for sharing her expertise and professional insight into navigating the immigration system, and to our student panelists from Justice Across Borders, College Democrats, and East African Student Association for leading such a thoughtful and engaging conversation. Conversations like this remind us that immigration law is not just a matter of policy, it is about people, rights, and the values that shape our democracy. By coming together to listen, question, and learn, we take an important step toward deeper understanding and more informed civic engagement. Thank you again for joining us today. We hope you continue these conversations beyond this room, and we look forward to seeing you at our next roundtable.